AdLib is the smartest way to activate programmatic. Built for expert traders, yet easy enough for any marketer. Launch across all top DSPs without contracts, overhead, or busy work. Schedule a free trial today and start maximizing ROAS with AdLib. Check out AdLib at getadlib.com. Thank you to MediaOcean for sponsoring Open Market. It started with some friendly banter on X, and now we're running a series of ads recapping the 13 announcements they made in June. Last week was the collab with Snowflake and Axiom. This week it's an integration with Disney Compass. With Innovid, you can measure activity across Disney properties and the Disney Real-Time Ad Exchange to see the impact it's driving for your business. The impact Disney is having on Eric? Tears, as he wistfully recalls the early days of raising his family. Now I'm the only young person he hangs out with. Just a weird, bald, entrepreneurial stepchild. Tune in next week for another news highlight and visit MediaOcean.com/pod to learn more. Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm joined by James Borow from Universal Ads and Eric Franchi. What's up, guys?
What's up, Joe? Thanks for having me. Big fan. Very excited to be on the pod.
Dan doesn't know the protocol that we just roll. So I think you let you off in the beginning.
Yeah, James was ready to do some prep and we were like, F it, we do it live. It's like Bill O'Reilly in here. We're just freaking slinging.
I had an Eric joke. That's what I was trying to do. No.
Well, I wanted to tell you that Eric was making jokes about you. I was saying that Dan Pantella and I are the ad tech millennial children vying for Eric's affection. And we were throwing you in the mix, and Eric was like, you can't throw James in the mix. He's like a quiet Gen Xer. And I was like, no way. James is a solid millennial.
I think I'm 40. I think I'm like an elder millennial.
You're a very solid millennial. You're just the older generation. You're the greatest generation of millennials, actually, because like the 80s were really popping out some high quality millennials. Like you look at music, you got like Drake, Kendrick, and Cole are all the 80s. Tennis, you have Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. It was a great decade. The 90s are like a very quiet decade.
I agree. And Dan is not of our, I love Dan, but Dan's like, I look at Dan as the next generation, right?
Well, the thing about me is I'm secretly like Dan's age, but you would never know it because Dan is the babyface killer. And I look old, which is, very good for entrepreneurial settings, especially when you're telling corporations to give you a lot of money. But yeah, no, Dan's the babyface killer.
If I recall correctly, I said that James actually straddles the two kind of generations we have here, where he's hanging with the Dan Pantello crew. I know for a fact he hangs with the Dan Pantello crew, but also he's a collaborator with me. So James is the ideal.
I'm the bridge. I'll take it.
It's the bridge between the youngs and the olds.
Exactly. Everybody loves James.
Anyway, before we get into it seriously, one more thing on the generations. So today I did a LinkedIn post and I called AI the most exciting technology of my lifetime. And so this guy comments and he's like, you think AI is better than the internet? And I'm like, you just think I'm older than I am. Like, I don't know what to tell you. The internet is not a technology of my lifetime. It predates me. It's not my fault that you thought I was old.
I'm going to like the post right now. It'll be there for 2 weeks for me to see. So,
yeah, exactly. So, James, we talk a lot about what is sometimes called performance TV on this podcast. I think there are a handful of companies approaching that from different angles. You're going to tell us today about the approach at Universal Ads. Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of key to Universal Ads is that we're a part of Comcast. And so the whole idea is, Comcast owns Freewheel. It's got a bunch of its own content properties. It's got an amazing, set of data kind of across the platform and across the entire corporation. And so, we had this idea of like, what if you really kind of replicated how the social networks work, but for CTV on top of like the collective assets of Comcast. And so with Universal Ads, you're literally buying the ads like directly from the publishers who are built on top of Freewheel. And so the kind of way that it manifests itself is like you go to universalads.com. There's no demand side fees. You sign up for an account. It looks just like the Instagram ad manager, Meta ad manager, Reddit, Snap, kind of all the social network platforms. And then we built all of it kind of from the ground up is all built on top of the Universal Ads API. So it is like the closest approximation of how the social networks work for CTV. And the end result of it is that it really is the most efficient way to buy the inventory that goes through Freewheel. We have now 17 publishers that are part of it, some like incredible names kind of across the board from Warner Bros. Discovery, and NBC Universal, Paramount, Roku, and Fox, kind of like the kind of who's who when it comes to CTV content. And, I'd say for me personally, there's probably about 20 or 25 of us now that worked on either like Snap's ad manager or Reddit's ad manager in the past that are here doing it. And it's like the first time we've been in CTV and trying to kind of merge all the learnings from social and TV. And so far, we feel really great about it. It's been pretty incredible.
It's a very logical path for you and the team. We'll tell the audience a little bit more about your startup experience later on, but just having kind of built out the Snap ad platform, geared towards self-serve, now doing it at Comcast makes a ton of sense. I gotta ask you, like, what was the motivation, or what convinced you to join like one of the largest companies, I think, in America or the world, having been a startup guy for most of your career? I find that so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it was, and I got to know them. They were so like honest and sincere about kind of trying to disrupt their existing ads business. And, again, if you step back and just look at the assets and you look at like, should there be basically an ads API driven CTV platform that is built on top of one of the largest CTV ad servers and SSPs out there? Like the answer is yes, right? Like that is like a resounding yes from like a pure like strategy perspective. I think what made me and a bunch of the people that Eric, so excited to join is that they're like, we're going to throw real resources at this and we want to go ahead and really kind of disrupt ourselves at this moment. And so I think, there was obviously like a leap of faith. We were kind of like, are they really going to let us do our thing? But it's been amazing. And there's no, I'd say even, it's almost been a year now. There's no like us. It's like, we're all part of Comcast. We're working with every group across the entire company. We announced at Cannes that we're going to be expanding to the UK via Sky. So it's really awesome. And it's, Comcast is one of those companies that like, I don't know if people know all the assets it really has. Like we know that in ad tech, but outside of it, if you're from Chicago, you think it's the internet provider. And like, if you live in LA, you have no idea that they own Universal Studios. But yeah, it's been awesome so far.
James moving to Comcast after a career in startups is like Eric moving to New Jersey after 10 years running around the city. It's like the next phase in the entrepreneur's journey. I also want to tell you guys that the gun pointed to James' head by the Comcast legal team as he was saying that is only metaphorical.
It has been no gun to my head, like extremely entrepreneurial feeling, which is, I mean, obviously different than what most people will think.
It's a huge advantage, obviously. It's like, it's very similar to PayPal ads in a way. Like it's, they're getting the chance to build this like ad tech startup within like a vast enterprise, and to have all of the resources. Like I can tell you working with them, as you would imagine, is like completely different from working with like most startups at like that sort of stage of company.
Totally. I have friends that are at Microsoft working on LinkedIn. And I think that's like kind of a good analogy too on the ads platform, where like they could access the frontier models earlier. Like there's all these benefits that you just sort of don't know about once you're inside one of these machines, but it is a machine. There's no doubt about it.
James, so it was very interesting to hear the way you described Universal Ads' approach to this thing we might call performance TV. We can also talk about that term, because I think I mainly see in the companies that are approaching this opportunity a couple different emphases, right? You have the people like Jason at TV Scientific who are totally focused on performance. And I believe he coined the term performance TV. Their whole pitch is a lot of what you said, right? It's about like search and social been eating the open web's lunch for a decade because they facilitate performance and they make it easy. And if the open web or CTV is to attract the hundreds of billions of dollars in ad spend from SMBs and the e-commerce brands, they need to facilitate performance, right? So sometimes the focus is on like measurement and optimization. Other times the focus is very much on access, right? And reaching smaller advertisers. Now, as we just said, these things are related because smaller advertisers tend to be performance advertisers. But like when I go to the Universal Ads site and it says like advertise directly with the biggest names in TV, I tend to get more of the latter emphasis, i.e. like we are helping advertisers who generally wouldn't be able to buy CTV in this way to do so. How do you think about those two emphases and how they maybe come together, or which one you put front and center?
the most important thing is performance, like hands down for us. So like this needs to drive outcome and drive your business. The reason why we talk about direct so much is because these advertisers that we're going after, which like kind of think of it as like Shopify plus merchant Instagram advertiser, they don't use DSPs. Like they would never pay basically a demand side fee. Like they buy direct from the source. When you buy Meta ads, you buy Meta ads. When you buy Snap ads, you buy Snap ads, Reddit ads, Reddit ads, TikTok ads, TikTok ads. And so what we're trying to facilitate is a path for you to go ahead and just buy this stuff the same way that you would buy the social networks, right? Like you just wouldn't even think of it to be done a different way if all you've done in the past is bought a bunch of Meta ads. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why we're trying to articulate the value there. It's obviously why this could only kind of happen inside Comcast, right? Because we're able to monetize on the freewheel side. But that's really kind of why that distinction's there. And then from a performance standpoint, and like, first of all, like TVSci, Vibe, like those companies are awesome. I love what they're doing. And I think they have an opportunity, we are in a very positive way constrained to the freewheel ecosystem, right? So like, similar to how you've had in social, you had basically companies that were aggregating multiple ecosystems together to build cross-platform tools. I think you're going to see that in CTV, and I think there's a huge spot for that there. But for us in sort of the universe that we occupy, we can make it like truly the most efficient, right? Just like basically just buy ads, no fees. And then we have a unified basically identity platform kind of behind the scenes. If you think about it, it's all built on top of the same stack. And so like our method to drive performance is really to model off of how the social networks work, right? It's audience-based advertising. We have our APIs that companies like Measured and House, Triple Whale, Prescient, shout out to an Imperium company, they're all integrating with. And that's our strategy. And I'd say on that front too, like when it comes to the APIs, it's really like we want to make sure we're like extremely, I'd say, confident and high level of conviction that like third-party measurement is the key for CTV. And so like we're partnering with everyone and we're trying to make sure like if you've done the integration for Meta or you've done the integration for Snap, it's basically copy paste through the integration for universal ads. So that kind of like flows through everything we do.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is direct access and performance are generally inextricably tied in this category, but especially for you guys, because the whole play is like Comcast IP is the unique advantage, and allowing advertisers to directly access it is a huge part of what is going to drive higher performance.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like you want to maximize the amount of working media and you want to standardize delivery across surfaces, right? So like this is an aspirational analogy, but like in some ways, I kind of think we have an opportunity to almost do what Apple is doing, but for CTV, right? If you like squint and look at the combined assets, with Comcast, it actually kind of looks like that. But at the end of the day, like it's all about just driving performance. Like I truly don't want advertisers spending $1 if it doesn't generate return for them, right? Like this is all about making it as economically rational as possible. The other thing is it's purely self-service. We provide no managed service. Like this is a muscle that we are developing for, I think, CTV that's like really helpful for the ecosystem as a whole. But it's definitely like a new muscle. So yeah, but again, like we launched our first ad 180 days ago, and like the velocity of what we've shipped is pretty awesome. I think like it's kind of unlike anything I've seen before, kind of on teams I've worked on.
Who are the ideal customers or current customers for this? Given that it's, all self-serve, like hands on keyboard, you probably don't have a big sales team. You're probably more of a like product and BD team.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like, I'd sort of say like the Shopify Plus merchant is really like the ICP in a lot of ways. And these aren't like small businesses, right? They could be spending $5-10 million a year on social, right? And they're trying to figure out kind of how does CTV fit into it. We've seen a lot of success sort of with that archetype. We also like, a big philosophy for us is really, this is like a little bit ironic coming probably from Comcast, but my point of view is TV is really kind of like the new second screen, and that's totally fine, right? So like in reality, what happens is people watch TV and then they like buy something on their phone in most cases. And so an advertiser that is multi-channel in terms of their marketing spend and that is willing to measure things based on not just post-click, like you will see really good results with CTV. But, I think like if you're looking at it like it's a pure post-click, attribution platform, like we just, by and large, people do not click on TV ads. So, it's just a different game that we have to play.
How much of an education process is this for those types of advertisers? Like, is this their first time buying CTV? Have they done a test or two before? Like, what typically is the challenge? Is it education or is it just sales product?
I think everyone kind of knows that they should be advertising on TV. Like I think it's pretty well documented, the effectiveness of it. I think the key has really just been these AI tools for creative in particular that has now made it where like you've sort of taken the excuse out of it, right? Before, like it was daunting to go shoot a TV ad. Like that is overwhelming. And now that sort of problem is largely being addressed by the ecosystem, I think it's now going to make its time to test again, right? If you have tested in the past and it didn't work properly, like the reality is creative is the most impactful thing in terms of performance. And so like before, if you had to shoot one ad and then you had to run it for 3 months and you couldn't iterate on it, like, I think it's just now at a point where it's really very similar to how you run your social media advertising. And so I think, it's just kind of going to a lot of these brands, and businesses and saying like, if we truly think it's time for you guys to test again, like all the pieces are here for you.
Yeah, that's great. It's like all these things have come together with, streaming, with platforms, with AI. It's like there's no excuses anymore.
The fact that, Prescient and all these companies exist, right? And that like these brands are now realizing, and I know this from experience working at like Walled Gardens, that like if you were to add up all of the first party attribution across ad managers, it would show like 5 times more sales than you actually have. And so like now that everyone gets that, it's just like another piece of the puzzle that's finally there where, like you can trust Prescient, you can trust House, you can trust Measure, like they're totally impartial. And the great thing about it is that when you start to use those tools, they do show like the actual value of CTV, right? Like just like there's a huge halo effect to CTV and there's a huge direct effect too. So I think just a lot of stuff are lining up to make this all work.
Do you have your own proprietary measurement technology that you pair with those third-party validators, or is it more about saying someone else is going to grade the homework?
So we have a Pixel. It's a great Pixel. It does its job, but I look at Pixel really as being used for targeting, right? Not measurement. It obviously measures things, but just given the fact that if you were to leave your house after watching TV and then go on the subway and buy something, that type of attribution doesn't exist in TV for the most part. So our philosophy is really like absolutely use the Pixel. It's a no-brainer for making sure that you are targeting the right people and like updating segments, but you should use third-party measurement to really see the true impact of it. What we do kind of that's like behind the scenes, proprietary is we have our own machine learning algorithms on basically the delivery side, right? So like when you advertise with us, we have a bunch of objectives very similar to when you're buying an ad on Meta, right? So like, video views, conversions, we'll add, I bet you a year from now, we have like 15 different objectives that we're supporting. And so like that's sort of the magic, right? That's like where, not only are we making it as efficient as possible, but we're also making it extremely smart. And then if you can kind of match efficiency and like intelligence with like simplicity, that starts to look a lot like the social playbook. That's really kind of where we're trying to take it.
Yeah, because I think when you put all these different components together, you might also see how the different performance TV companies are approaching the opportunity distinctly, right? So like you have creative automation, right, is one piece. Like I know Jonathan Moffey at Streamer, that's like what he's focused on. You have like measurement and optimization, where I view like the TV scientific guys as leaning in. You have direct access, right, to this like incredibly valuable inventory that's otherwise very hard to reach, which you guys have a distinct advantage on given the Comcast IP. So obviously everyone will do like multiple pieces of this, but it's interesting to think about how those different investments create sort of like differentiated companies within the emerging category.
And that's why like, for our API, which like we announced, the API partnership program, we have a bunch of partners that they're the Universal Ads business partners, but hopefully what's going to happen is the same thing that happened with Meta, right? And with Snap is that there's an ecosystem of companies built on top of this API. API is free, right? We don't charge anyone to use it. And, you'll start to see that there's going to be, tools that are built for kind of every problem set that can exist. And the philosophy within the social networks was always like, let's make Ad Manager kind of like lowest common denominator, right? The most appealing, kind of easy to use solution. And then have API partners solve all the different types of problems. And, I think that, what we're doing makes that a reality. And I think there's going to be some like really great companies that are built on top of our API. Streamer is one of those, a really great partner of ours. And it's a good example where, they were able to integrate our API, like literally kind of copy and paste what they've done for Instagram. And now you're pushing out TV ads. So, I think to your point, like, for us, it's like, it's an ecosystem play, not like a centralization play. And, I think every partner just makes CTV more accessible and approachable.
Shout out to Mafi. We know that he listens.
Yeah. He is the best. I love that guy.
I love Mafi. I'm in LA, so I'm gonna hang out with him next week.
I'm here too.
Oh yeah, James.
Yeah.
Or should it be like a performance TV ad tech dinner? Maybe.
Oh,
yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about you and like your startup path. So, your last company was Market AI. Ephraim was an investor. You sold the business last year to Verishell. Is that still the name of the company?
Yeah, they bought another company called Trendlytics, and so that's been like the main brand for them. But it was founded by Imran Khan, who was the chief strategy officer of Snapchat. Sort of famously, he took Alibaba public, and then more recently, he's had one of the most successful hedge funds in the last like 18 months called Pro-Am. So he's a brilliant guy, a good friend, and so yeah, we did that deal last year, and then 2016. I sold my first company, Shift. It's funny because Shift was basically, it was the first Facebook Ads API partner back in like 2009. And just, it's amazing how like the joke with my friends, like we're kind of like a one-trick pony. Like we keep just doing sort of some version of these Ads API businesses. So it all kind of comes full circle.
I know, it's incredible. You're building it inside of Comcast right now. The majority of our listenership are just ad tech entrepreneurs and founders and CEOs. So they love to hear the stories about the exits. So how did the exit of Market come about?
Yeah, I mean, that was, Emron came to us and, he had this vision of like, what if there was going to be just a full stack of B2B AI tools, and then built on top of also, he had this Verishell marketplace of just a bunch of really, really amazing data and merchant relationships. And so, for us, it was one of those things where like I would bet on Emron 1,000 times over and over again. And so the idea of combining the assets was just like so appealing to us that we thought, like we got to do it. And so now actually the CEO of the group is a woman named Kate Kahn. It's Emron's wife, but she ran a segment over at Amazon for years. She's brilliant. So that was one, obviously, I think we're like, having a historical relationship, with Emron, I think made that possible. I think the first company back in the day, Shift, that was originally acquired by Brand Networks and AEA. AEA was doing basically a roll up of social network ad tech companies. It's a private equity firm. And so they bought Optimal, which is Robert Letherin's company. They bought Shift, which was my company. And then they bought Brand Networks. That was a result of a meeting I really didn't want to go to. And my co-founder at the time, Clark Landry, made me go to it. And his advice was like, just like, you always want to hear people out. We left the meeting and I was like, we should do this deal. It was definitely one of those things where like, you never know what things are going to come just by showing up.
Clark Landry, unsung hero of ad tech. Oh my God. Another LA guy too. Yeah. So no longer there, right?
He's in Nashville now. Yeah. He's running the venture arm for Hawk Media. And him, Kim Perrell, that kind of crew of Evan Rifkin. I mean, they're like the West Coast version of you guys. It's like,
I'll take it. I'll take it. They're amazing.
Yeah, no, they're amazing. They were all angels in the trade desk, which is incredible. And I remember they brought the deal to me. And I was like, I don't get it. Cause it was just at the period of time where, you had like Rocket Fuel, you had all these DSPs. It just like, you have to give Jeff just like a massive amount of credit for just executing incredibly. But I did say no to angel investing in trade desk, which was very dumb.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Eric's like, we won't linger on that.
Yeah.
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 Oh man. So you sold two companies. What have you learned from selling two companies?
I think the most valuable thing for me, it's been like, whether it's been like some of the companies or building stuff inside of like Snap, Eric, you obviously know this, but like when we joined Snap, we joined Snap after Shift had been acquired, and then Snap actually ended up acquiring Shift from the private equity firm. And so I've worked with basically the same group of people since 2009. So it's probably been 16 years. I've worked with probably the same mix of like 20 or so people. And now they're all at Comcast with me as well. And so I think what I've learned is that like these careers are long. Like the crew that you work with today, if you're running a startup, like very likely is going to be the crew you work with for like the rest of your life if you're lucky. So I'd like kind of like honor and like treasure that. It's kind of cheesy, but like these people like were at my wedding, they like best friends, and like we've worked together on 1,000 different things, and we'll work together hopefully on 1,000 more things. And I learned that from Clark Landry and kind of that crew because they all just were such good friends. And so I think like if you're running a company right now, just make sure you like keep that in mind and don't do anything that would ever jeopardize those relationships, because they're going to be they're way more meaningful than you think. And then like, I think there's a point of time, at least for me, where I almost like resented the fact that like I kind of just like did this one thing, which was build out these sort of API ad platforms. And you kind of wanted to do different things, just kind of like to kind of human nature. But I think like if you're running a company right now and yourself, like I wouldn't be scared of trying to do like the next version of it as your next show. Like the world like changes so much. And now like when it even comes to ad tech, like for a period of time, I think I was like, there was a little bit of a moment where it was like kind of boring. And now it is like so exciting. And there's like so much cool stuff going on. And like, there's so much opportunity out there. So I think I wouldn't hesitate to like, if you sell your company, like next time you go, you're allowed to go ahead and do the same thing. Like you may be able to just like learn a ton from it.
I heard three things in there. One is the classic adage, companies are bought, not sold, especially if market, right? That seemed to work out in that case. Two is like bet on people, or like, the Scott Gallowayism, greatness is in the agency of others. Like just how big an impact that has on a company and a career. But the third is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is like, I think basically all successful business people understand like compounding interest, the eighth wonder of the world. I think most of us actually really undervalue that compounding effect when it comes to like subject matter and industry, because I think we just like, we get bored and like we have shiny object syndrome and like we want to go like try something else. But I think like there is such a tremendous amount of value to be created in sticking with something extremely well. And I think, a lot of people, they have that like manifest destiny, I got to go conquer new territory type of thing. But it's like, I'm like 5 years into being like really immersed into ad tech. And it's like, I'm so much better at it, at helping companies do what I do in the space than I was like 2 years ago. And it's like, if you can stick it out, you want to harvest the compounding advantage of like all the relationships and knowledge that go into sticking with a certain thing.
Yeah, it's like one of the things I'm like most thankful for. And like, again, this Comcast example is a really good one where it's like, it's sort of the culmination of like 18 years of friendships and like relationships and sort of like lessons in it. And I think when I started my first company, I was like 24, sold it, I was like 29. Like, it's hard to imagine when you're like 29 being 40. And like how much value you can accrue over 11 years of just like, to your point, like maintaining and building those relationships. But, if you look at it, like, at least for me now, and like Eric, I very much count you like in this as like one of my friends, and also just like our networks are so tied together. But, you wake up and like all of our friends are kind of making really important decisions in this ecosystem. It's, and it's very helpful, right? And I think everyone gets along, and it's been like so positive. So yeah, the compounding sort of effect of it is something that's like pretty non-obvious, but incredibly impactful.
What's interesting is you said two things, James, that remind me of what Jonah Goodhart said on the conversation we had with him just a few weeks ago on the pod. And this is a big compliment because, it's well known, Jonah's one of the GOATs, and I hold him in super high regard. First, he's building another marketing analytics company after having built arguably the best of all time in Moat. And he's back in it. And he didn't build a different thing in ad tech. He's building the next generation of marketing analytics, right? So it's, if like the API thing is your thing, that's okay, right? Because if you're just like pointed in the right direction, these things are growing. And then the other thing he said, and I'm going to paraphrase him, he says something to the effect of like, very few things are invented. And like, it's just like there's a through line where you continue to build on the previous. And again, this, sort of reminds me a lot of like what you're focused on and, just taking what you've learned and executing it on the biggest scale. Right. And there's nothing wrong with just like taking the learning, stacking on top of the learning, because at some point you're going to just have the opportunity to build it at the biggest scale and on the largest stage. And to me, that seems to be what you're pointed out right now with Comcast ads. I mean, if you think about it in terms of sticking with what you know and taking advantage of the compound interest, you, Jonah, Brian O'Kelly, Omar Tawakol, I mean, these are people that have been in the industry for 2 decades now. Right. So it's like an extremely like well-trodden path of people that are just, paying it forward in a lot of ways of building new businesses, but then also realizing that you can, do great things if you just stick to it.
James, this obviously doesn't really pertain to Universal Ads because you guys are already operating within a large enterprise. But do you think the Trade Desk should buy a performance TV company?
I think for my friends who work at those companies, it'd be awesome. I want my friends who get exits. I think, I don't know. They have such great tech. I think, I don't know if if it's like necessarily like a technology thing. It's probably a focus thing. I mean, they like obviously have done such a great job with, Fortune, 500, but I would assume they'll move down market. I mean, they should, right? But it's hard, and like, it's different. And I think kind of like, that's sort of what I'm trying to do, like from a strategy standpoint with Universal Ads is like, if you sort of look at what freewheel unlocks, it almost like lets every publisher become a hedged garden. So like, if you want to take demand from the Trade Desk, you can. If you want to stand up your own self-service tool, you can. If you want to be part of Universal Ads, you can, right? And like, our focus is really on just getting really that demand into CTV that just, again, was like curious about it, but like, each of these publishers by themselves may not have been big enough for like a developer to do the API integration or for like the advertiser to sit there and stand up the, campaign in the ad manager. So I definitely think that like these advertisers are going to advertise on TV without a doubt. I don't know if they're going to go through the Trade Desk, honestly. I just think a lot of them are not accustomed to buying through a DSP. So that's kind of my non-answer answer.
I think a lot of us understand, especially those of us who are bullish on the performance TV phenomenon, that to a large degree, the future of the open web runs through this ability to get the hundreds of billions of dollars from search and social ad spending onto these platforms, right? The open internet ad tech ecosystem. And I'm including CTV, and that depends on getting those search and social advertisers to come our way. The Trade Desk did earnings yesterday, and here's something Jeff said. Some have mistakenly thought our ambitions are about display. Some have mistakenly thought our ambitions were only about CTV or branding budgets. Our goal is to buy the entire open internet objectively for buyers, big and small. We've started with the biggest and we serve them well, yada, yada, yada. But obviously he's pointing to like, for them to continue growing at the clip they have, which, the earnings call yesterday showed revenue up, I think it was 20% year over year or something. But like, I think it pointed to growth slowing, which is what sent their stock nosediving for the second time in the last, 6 months or so. I think for them to continue growing at the clip they have, they do need to essentially deliver on the performance TV thesis, right? Like they need to be able to bring these smaller performance advertisers onto the platform. And so I guess whether they should buy a performance TV company becomes a question of, do they have the tech to do that? Is like the tech the problem? Is it just a go-to-market problem? Is it like a reputation issue? Like, or all of the above?
I don't think I can comment on like what the problem is, but I definitely know the solution. And the solution is for these advertisers to have basically like the same workflow and the same sort of economic relationship with CTV that they have with the social networks, right? Like that to me is like, that's the key. We're trying to do everything we can to sort of facilitate that. And I think we sort of just keep our heads down and do that and explain to people why that's so valuable is great. The joke of it, honestly, is that when we explain it to brands that spend all their money on social, there's not even like a nuance. They're like, oh yeah, that's like so obvious. They're like, it doesn't work this way. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work this way. It's super weird. It's so different than how kind of we were all, there's like the walled garden ad tech and like the open web ad tech. And although it's all ad tech, they really kind of historically have not really kind of overlapped in a weird way. And so this is sort of that moment. And hopefully we can be a good driver for it. Yeah.
That seems like a good place to end.
Amen.
Awesome. James, thank you so much. This is great, man. If people want to learn more about Universal Ads or contact you, where should they go?
Just add me on LinkedIn, probably the best thing. If you follow me, you'll get really old posts from a few weeks ago because that algorithm is so weird right now. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place.
Awesome. James, thank you very much. I'll see you in LA with Mafi. We'll take a shirtless photo on the beach and tan as per Eric's recommendations because he's the expert.
Deal.
All right. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.